So yeah, Josh, I think we will go ahead and get this started. So thanks everybody who's attending today. This is our Be Cybersecure, Not Lucky series of webinars that we have once a month. Today's webinar is going to be over harnessing Microsoft Purview. We had a previous webinar in the series around Copilot, and we'll be, or rather, all the various Copilots, and we'll be having another in a month on actually Copilot for security. So I encourage everyone to head over to aitpresents.com, register if you haven't already for the series so that you keep up to date with what we have going on and stay in touch and receive some valuable content from AIT. So like I said, today is around Purview. Appreciate everybody that's here. Just so you know, we are recording this session. The session itself and the slides that we're using today will be sent out after the webinar is over. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Josh. I guess before I do, my name's Bush Williams. I'm sort of facilitating the webinar today. I'll have some contact information and some ways to get in touch with AIT once the presentation's over. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. But for now, this is Mr. Wilson's show for talking about Microsoft Purview, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Josh, to do an intro and take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bush.
You bet.
My name is Josh Wilson, and I'm a senior data security engineer here at AIT with prior experience in cybersecurity consulting at a Big Four firm, and have experienced multiple data protection program build-outs for large enterprises. My expertise includes consulting, designing, and implementing data protection strategies and technologies to prevent data loss and ensure sensitive data is protected. This spans things like information protection, data loss prevention, to insider risk management, even written policies to tailor solutions, in this case, the solutions within Microsoft Purview to meet the unique needs of a given environment. So here's a brief overview of the agenda and the topics that we'll be discussing today. So I'd like to start off from the top down to give an understanding of essential components of a data protection strategy before we get into the Microsoft Purview platform itself. And this initially involves a people, process, and technology approach. So the people component can involve many potential stakeholders. For example, CISO, SecOps, compliance officers, data admins, and data owners in your organization. But there may not be people with these specific titles listed. The important thing to remember is that these roles should be represented in some capacity. You should know that conversation should focus more around data protection than compliance to effectively engage a broader audience of stakeholders. As far as the process component, it's important to have major phases mapped out to align the stakeholders within the organization on steps needed for a successful implementation. And lastly, we have our technology component, in this case being the Microsoft Purview platform. Once we've identified and engaged our stakeholder audience and mapped out our processes, we can utilize Microsoft Purview to more or less meet our requirements and provide a single pane of glass that houses a comprehensive suite of solutions centered around data protection, governance, risk, and compliance. So here's a visual showing the people, process, and technology approach. As you can see, some of the roles represented at the top row, and an example of a data classification process, as well as the technology at the bottom being Microsoft Purview. So getting into the next piece that I'd like to talk about as far as the data protection strategy, we have our data protection lifecycle. So initially, we're going to want to know our data. So understanding our data landscape and identifying important data or sensitive data, maybe intellectual property that's specific to your environment or your organization across your hybrid environment. And then we move into protecting your data, which is where we get into applying flexible protection actions using encryption, access controls, and visual markings. And this is where the information protection piece of Microsoft Purview will allow you to provide these actions, or will provide you these actions. And moving into the prevent data loss piece, this allows us to detect risky behavior and prevent accidental oversharing of sensitive information. And we can satisfy this with Microsoft Purview's data loss prevention and insider risk management solutions. And the govern your data piece, which helps automatically retain, delete, and store data and or records in a compliant manner. We can use Microsoft Purview data lifecycle management to satisfy this piece of the lifecycle. And I would like to note that this is a continuous process or continuous cycle where you may need to revisit various stages in the lifecycle based on your needs and any changes to the business. But we can dive a little bit deeper into each of these phases. So first off is know your data, right? You want to understand the sensitive data types, and understanding your data landscape is crucial to assess risks and build a foundation of your data protection strategy. Identifying your organization's sensitive data and its locations where it may reside to protect and govern it is more or less a great place to start. So Microsoft Purview provides built-in sensitive information types, which are patterns recognized through regular expressions or functions, for instance, like social security numbers, credit card numbers, etc. And Microsoft Purview provides over 200 out-of-the-box common sensitive information types and the ability to create custom types to assist in identifying your proprietary sensitive data if the out-of-the-box types don't cover that. And lastly, the sensitivity labels such as confidential will assist your users throughout your organization to understand and categorize your sensitive data. Next, we move to protect your data. Customers typically want to apply some level of protection for the most sensitive data to prevent it from getting into the wrong hands. Microsoft's solution for meeting this requirement is information protection, which we'll get into once we get into the Microsoft Purview overview, but it more or less helps you discover, classify, and protect sensitive and business critical data across your organization. This is accomplished by enabling users and admins to apply protection actions from visual markings to adding encryption access restrictions to this data. And it also seamlessly integrates throughout M365 apps like Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, as well as SharePoint online sites, OneDrive accounts. The list goes on. And the best part about these sensitivity labels is that when data is labeled, it remains safeguarded regardless of where it travels, where it's used, or where it resides, based on the encryption settings of the label. Now we move on to prevent data loss. After we know our data and we protect our data, we prevent data loss. The data loss prevention solution within Microsoft Purview will help us satisfy this need. Understanding your business processes to know what activities are acceptable versus what are not, and adjusting controls based on the destination of the data, whether it's shared internally versus externally, how we want to react, depending on that. And then responding differently based on the volume of the sensitive data that's shared, and tailoring DLP's responses to the sensitivity of the data. For example, maybe a low impact rule might monitor and warrant a user warning, where a high impact rule might block sharing and trigger an admin alert. Finally, once we know our data, protect our data, and prevent data loss, we can govern our data. Governing your data is more or less keeping what you need and deleting what you don't to meet compliance requirements and reduce your overall risk landscape. Data lifecycle management solution within Microsoft Purview manages your content lifecycle using solutions to import, store, and classify using retention labels to classify business critical data so you can keep what you need and delete what you don't. I wanted to note that it also helps to have a written data retention policy to use as a guide to point to and follow for the application of retention labels within Microsoft Purview. Next, we'll examine the data security risks. So we all know trust is crucial. If customers or employees lose trust in your org, they may not want to continue their relationship. Also, compliance with regulations and standards is essential these days for maintaining trust and doing business. As far as reputational damage, a significant data leak can damage your reputation and make it harder to attract new customers. you have to ask yourself, what legacy would you like to leave behind? And as far as the fines go, fines for noncompliance can be substantial. Moving forward to data security risks realized, we can see some statistics here. The landscape, as we know, the landscape of cybersecurity is ever evolving. As our digital world expands, so do the associated risks. See that research indicates that 83% of organizations have experienced multiple data breaches over time. While external threats were once a primary concern, data leaks and theft have now become some of the most prevalent vulnerabilities that organizations must address. In 2024, the global average cost of a data breach rose to $4.88 million, reflecting a 10% increase from the previous year. And lastly, research by Microsoft reveals that 80% of decision makers have purchased multiple products to meet compliance and data protection requirements. With the majority acquiring more than 3 products, this fragmented solution landscape adds complexity for security teams, increasing costs and efforts to integrate disparate signals and develop a cohesive remediation strategy. So that's where Microsoft Purview comes in. Security through simplicity. It satisfies all of these needs without having to have multiple solutions add complexity for your security team. And so at a high level, what exactly is Microsoft Purview, right? I get this question a lot. Some people refer to it as DLP. You know, it's nice to align on vernacular and to really have a good understanding of what even is Purview, right? So Purview itself is a data protection, governance, risk, and compliance platform that houses the solutions themselves that have different applications based on your business requirements and regulatory or compliance needs. So it's a platform that houses all these different solutions within it. Purview itself is not a solution, but it's more of a platform that houses the solutions. So why Purview, right? So these days, data security is more crucial than ever. Chances are, if you aren't utilizing Purview, we're only telling part of the story, because if you've already bought into the Microsoft ecosystem, you're already leveraging identities with Entra ID, you're most likely using Defender to secure your endpoints, you're using Microsoft Sentinel as your SIM, but leaving Purview out of the picture is like basically leaving your front door open. You've left yourself unprotected, because if malicious actors are determined enough to get past numerous controls and penetrate your identities, then they've got what they want, which is your data. And if that data is not protected, then we have no last line of defense. So moving forward, here's an overview of states of data in the Microsoft Purview platform. So just wanted to touch on states of data real quick. So just like we have states of matter, which is a solid, a liquid, or gas, we have states of data, that being data in motion, data in use, and data at rest. For data in motion, think about someone sending data via email or uploading data via HTTPS to a website. For data in use, think about data that's actively being accessed or processed by an application, like someone saving data to an external drive, or even just using a Word document. For data at rest, think about data that's stored in a database, on physical or virtual disk drive, or more or less data that's stored that is not actively being used or moved. And so when we think of data protection, we're trying to protect these different data states, and depending on the solution in the Microsoft Purview platform, we're provided the capability to protect all of these states of data. So on the right here, as you can see, Microsoft Purview contains quite a few data security, governance, risk, and compliance solutions. But for today's session, I'm only going to touch on the underlying solutions, but give a brief overview of the others within the Purview platform as a great starting point to maximize your investment in the Microsoft ecosystem. So here's a quick overview of the data security and governance solutions. So information protection, these are your sensitivity labels that help you classify and secure sensitive data, regardless of where it's shared, stored, or used. We typically like to map these to a data classification schema. However you define it, then we can apply that, and we can also create sublabels, but we'll get into that later. We'll dive a little bit into information protection and DLP. But for DLP, or data loss prevention, it provides controls upon various data loss channels to monitor and prevent data exfiltration. So this is more of an actionable piece where we can monitor, actually prevent data leakage or data exfiltration, whether it's malicious or it's just improper use of data, whether it's sharing, copying, or storing the sensitive data. The insider risk management solution detects and mitigates risks from within your organization by monitoring user activities and identifying suspicious user behavior. And all these solutions play well with each other and talk throughout the stack. And insider risk management pulls telemetry from information protection and data loss prevention to identify high risk users versus medium risk users versus low risk users. And you can even, based on their activities, say if one user's downloading a bunch of data from SharePoint, they're matching on DLP policies, doing things that they shouldn't be doing, right? They're going to be a higher risk, and we can actually use that as a condition in DLP policies to more or less tune them. As far as data lifecycle management, this is more of a governance solution which provides capabilities to retain content through retention labels and delete unnecessary content based on those labels. And this helps manage the lifecycle of your organization's data in SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange Online, and Teams. So moving forward, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into information protection. So once you've identified the sensitive data types you need to protect and understand where your data resides within your environment, the first step is to implement information protection labels and label policies. So defining your labels according to your data classification schema, whether that's public, internal, confidential, whatever it may be, and identifying sensitive information types that we're looking for will ensure consistent labeling and tagging of data within your M365 environment. So applying labels to assets is more or less a simple process. It can be done manually by users within the documents themselves, or automatically within the Purview portal using auto labeling rules to ensure that your sensitive data is appropriately classified and protected. But I did want to note that if we go the auto labeling route, it's recommended to run it in simulation mode to allow you to thoroughly test and refine the auto labeling process to make sure that false positives are minimized and user impacts assessed before we actually deploy the auto labeling to production, because it can have a large impact on your environment. Moving on to DLP. So what exactly is DLP, right? I get asked this question quite frequently, actually. So now that the sensitive data has been defined, discovered, and classified, the next step to implement DLP, or data loss prevention, is to implement DLP, to help your organization prevent accidental or malicious leaks of sensitive data by detecting, monitoring, and blocking any exfiltration attempts. But DLP more or less provides controls based on various locations to monitor or block sensitive data that is in motion. We can detect it at rest, and we can even detect it in use. So DLP kind of covers all the states of data. We can detect, when somebody copies sensitive data to clipboard. We can detect when somebody, saves sensitive data to a USB drive, right? We can detect when someone uploads sensitive data into an AI prompt, or even just pastes sensitive data into an AI prompt. But DLP is more of the actionable piece where we identify the scope of locations and the sensitive data types that we're looking to protect. And then we provide control measures on top of those locations. And so creating DLP policies within Purview is pretty straightforward, but it's really crucial here to have a top-down perspective. And this is a little bit different than traditional technologies where we can just, we're used to just going in and deploying the technology itself, but this technology can be very disruptive to your business depending on the levels of the enforcement used. So we don't want to be hindering workflows, right? So we want to get in front of it to understand the workflows that are acceptable versus what is not acceptable, to ensure, that we start with a strategic approach with the business, ensuring that we have buy-in from the organization, identifying the business requirements, defining the locations and scope of what we're looking to protect, whether it's Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, SaaS applications, on-premise repositories, whatever that may be, and determining how to enforce those DLP policies and conduct user awareness training to promote a secure culture. whether it's through traditional security and awareness training or built-in policy tips for users. As we know, humans are the weakest link in security. So this is something where you want to start off, not as restrictive maybe, and start to identify where you want to be more restrictive with blocking the data flows. So, and again, it's highly recommended to run DLP policies in simulation mode first. This allows for a full test cycle to run to determine the user impact and allow you to refine the conditions, scope, and enforcement of those DLP policies. But once your DLP policies are ready for production and you've run multiple phase tests in simulation mode, they're automatically applied once you turn it on across the defined scope configured within the policies to ensure that your sensitive data is protected. And then moving forward, we're still on the DLP portion here. Just wanted to dive a little bit into the coverage here. So here's a little visual that showcases, where DLP spans, and it spans M365 endpoints, non-Microsoft apps, as well as on-premise repositories. Provides organizations with comprehensive monitoring control capabilities for data protection and compliance across various environments, all from a single location. That's why I think Microsoft Purview is so powerful, is because it houses all these solutions to meet various requirements and needs of your business. So the integration points itself for data loss prevention, as far as M365, DLP seamlessly integrates with Exchange, Office apps, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. For endpoints, Windows machines integrate seamlessly, and Apple devices are also pretty easy to integrate. For DLP endpoint policies on the web, Microsoft Edge integrates seamlessly, while Chrome and Firefox require the Microsoft Purview browser extension. So for non-Microsoft apps, Microsoft Purview also offers more than 70 out-of-the-box data connectors for third-party locations as well, outside of the M365 tenant. So on-premise data stores covers file shares, NAS storage, on-premise SharePoint, SQL Server, and pretty much any files that Windows can index. Moving forward, we have our Microsoft Purview risk and compliance solutions. Again, I'm just going to get into the compliance manager here just for the sake of time. There's a lot to cover, as Microsoft Purview houses tons of different solutions, but I'll give a brief overview here. So compliance manager is more or less a dashboard that helps you manage your compliance requirements, and it provides risk-based compliance scores and pre-built assessments based on what regulatory requirements or compliance requirements you may have. Information barriers, it's a compliance solution as well, and allows you to restrict two-way communication and collaboration between users and groups in Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Say we have, for instance, finance personnel that are working on certain types of information that we don't want marketing to have access to. We can restrict communication, so we don't want marketing users in a finance group and what have you, right? E-discovery helps identify and deliver electronic information for use as evidence in legal cases. This is more of a legal tool than an IT tool, although IT can kind of get lumped in when dealing with e-discovery cases. But it is also a very powerful tool. And communication compliance minimizes communication risks by helping you detect, capture, and act on potentially inappropriate messages in your organization and exchange online in Teams. So diving into the compliance manager a little bit more, compliance manager is a really nifty and comprehensive tool for your M365 tenant, and it's designed to more or less help you meet various regulations, right? So upon accessing the compliance manager, you'll find a list of improvement actions for your tenant, and it's essentially a to-do list that it provides you for your data security and compliance team, or whoever may be administering it. And this initial list is based on Microsoft security and compliance baselines. However, you can also audit against specific regulatory bodies like CMMC, NIST, and SOX. And Microsoft provides a pretty robust library of international regulatory standards to assess your entire 365 tenant, offering tenant-based recommendations to identify potential regulatory violations. So Compliance Manager is very nice tool. to get started meeting your regulatory needs. And moving forward, we have a pretty hot topic, which is AI and data security. Just wanted to briefly touch on a key factor for the renewed interest in data security, actually, which is AI. While AI-powered applications offer time-saving utilities and insights to boost productivity, they can also expose a significant amount of data about your organization. This has increased the need to protect the growing amount of data from exposure, and this is where Microsoft Purview comes in. So Microsoft has actually been developing a solution called the AI Hub within Microsoft Purview that's currently in preview. This powerful solution is highly recommended for organizations adopting Copilot, other AI tools, or just in general, just to control ethical AI usage. The AI Hub helps monitor the ethical use of AI by assisting in creating insider risk management policies to detect, for example, as you see on the screen, insider risk management policies to detect users browsing AI assistants, and DLP policies to identify sensitive data pasted or uploaded to AI assistants, and also provides an analytics dashboard that visualizes activities such as total interactions with AI, visits to generative AI apps, and even things like sensitive interactions per AI app. The list goes on and on. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the current developments as far as data security for AI with Microsoft. And this is a very powerful tool that you're able to access within your tenant currently. And so moving forward, just wanted to go over the implementation plan itself and kind of just bring everything together, right? So this is more or less the implementation plan for a typical organization that I put together for a full-scale data protection program, and listed out by phases and effort, right? So typically we start at phase 0. We ask, hey, do you have a data classification schema, right? Is it baked into your information security policy? That's great. If you don't have a data classification schema, something that identifies your public versus internal use versus confidential, however you identify those classifications and the data elements that fall under them, this is something that I feel is required and needed as far as something to point to for the labels that we map the labels to. And this is something that's important to kind of educate your users, understanding, if they see internal use or if they see a confidential document, whatever it may be, hey, maybe I shouldn't save that to an external drive, right? Or hey, maybe I shouldn't send that externally to someone outside of my company. However you define those security controls lives and resides within that data classification policy or something similar. So once we have that, we can map that classification policy to our information protection labels. And so whether it's public, internal use, confidential, highly confidential, we can, at that point, perform configuration on those classifications. Internal use is not as restrictive as confidential, which is not as restrictive as highly confidential or restrictive, right? However that's defined. And then from the information protection labels, we move into data loss prevention piece of this, which is the information protection is more of the know your data, protect your data. The data loss prevention piece is more of the prevent data loss, and providing that actionable piece where we can monitor and prevent data exfiltration attempts. And the information protection labels actually work hand in hand with data loss prevention as well. So if we perform data loss prevention before we do information protection, we're really kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, right? So there's a method to the madness here. And after we've gone through and done DLP, we like to go through, and if we don't already have retention labels, we'll go through and label, whatever the scope is of your data retention, based on, how long you want to keep it, if you want to delete it, do you not want to delete it, whatever that may be, we'll go through and do that. But there should be a data retention policy, a written policy itself to point to that kind of outlines, how long we want to keep certain types of data. Because if we don't have that, it's kind of just a shot in the dark. We want a a guide to point us, how should we apply this technology, right? And that's the data lifecycle management piece, is actually applying the retention labels. Sorry, not to get confused, but the data retention policy development, we'd like to check, hey, do you have a data retention policy, right? If not, maybe that's something that we consider going through with you and making sure that, you identify how you want to retain data, delete it, etc., right? And what types of data. So, and then we apply the retention labels based on that written data retention policy. And from there, the cherry on top would be insider risk management, which kind of pulls everything together. It talks throughout the stack to gain telemetry based on the activities that your users perform to identify high risk users versus medium risk users versus low risk users. And this is typically the phasing and how I would do it and the steps that we would take for a full scale data protection program of any organization. And it looks like we are
Yeah.
already at the Q&A here.
Yeah, Josh, thanks for that. That was a fantastic presentation. It is a vast topic. There's such a different approach to DLP as opposed to what I feel like we've traditionally seen in IT, which is, you scope it, you deploy it. There's so much that is involved from a potentially discussing with business units and classification, and everybody's sort of turning their keys and agreeing. It really is just a complex and vast initiative, I think, for a lot of organizations to summarize into 30 minutes. And I think you did really well to kind of pull together the high level overview. Moving sort of into the post presentation though. We do have some questions that were posed to us before the webinar. We always ask all folks that are invited to, if we could cover off on one thing, what would that be? So let's step through a few of these. And again, for everyone who's in attendance, if you would like to ask questions, now would be a great time to put them in the chat, and we can get to those time permitting as well. But let's just kind of start here and go through a few of these. So one of our attendees wanted to know how long they should expect data protection and compliance deployment to last. So what's the, how do you book in this from a time perspective?
So, that's a good question, right? So the time it takes for a data protection deployment, it really varies depending on the size of the organization and the willingness or amount of interaction on the customer side, and whether or not you have an appetite for full deployment of all the solutions contained within Purview, or if you're just interested, for example, in the information protection and data loss prevention pieces. This is something that AIT would be able to assist with in scoping the solutions that we deem fit based on your organization's specific requirements and give a time estimate based on that. So it's really, you want the full pie? Do you want just a couple pieces of the pie? How big is your org? Are you willing to, meet with me, meet with us, on a frequent basis to move this thing along? There's a lot of working parts there. So, yeah.
Got it. So yeah, just kind of going back to what I was saying about this consultative approach, it's really a matter of tailoring each of these to each business's specific needs and coming up with a timeline and expectation after we've had that conversation. So yeah, it can vary, but it is an area we have expertise to help outline what the what the most impactful part of the deployments would be and help shepherd that along for our customers.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next one here. So what do you find is the best way to position this type of initiative with senior executives to obtain funding? So I know businesses are always sensitive to to what is the ROI, what is the so very similar to the other question here. What do we need to do as folks who are concerned about potential data exfiltration to sell it to the business, right?
Absolutely. So as far as that question is concerned, I would typically articulate how the initiative addresses specific pain points that the senior execs are concerned with. such as maybe compliance risks, data breaches, or operational inefficiencies, and link the initiative to strategic goals that support broader business objectives like enhancing customer trust or enabling data-driven decision making. I mean, we can provide a cost-benefit analysis that includes both quantitative and qualitative benefits. For example, detailing how Purview can reduce costs associated with data breaches, compliance failures, and manual data management efforts compared to using Purview. And it's also, I just wanted to note, it's important to note that, not to position this as an IT investment, but as a strategic move with substantial business value. So that's the main point to get across, I would say.
Yeah. And I think kind of another question that's in that same vein then, is about it not just being IT, it transcends IT. What other departments do you think are expected to be involved in a deal or a Purview deployment initiative? I know we've talked in the past about potentially interviewing business units in different parts of the business to really understand the data before we can classify. How encompassing of our customer staff is a Purview deployment?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the departments that would be involved in the actual deployment initiative, the ones that we'd be working hand in hand daily on something like this, I would say probably members of the C-suite, like a CISO, CTO, or COO, preferably like a CISO, IT and security, operations, legal and compliance, and even project management office. But outside of the initiative itself, so you were speaking of having interviews with stakeholder groups, right? Whether it's HR, marketing, all these different departments need to eventually be aware and trained accordingly on how to appropriately handle sensitive data. Because again, going back to the people portion of the strategy, right? We need to get in front of the people portion and the process portion before we actually implement the technology itself. Otherwise, it can come back to bite us if we're interrupting certain users' workflows. Or maybe certain people can't access documents that they were, previously able to. So things like that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being mindful of, you got to kind of cast a wide net when you're getting this, getting all of this information together, because the last thing you want to do is to go through this effort and find that, you weren't all inclusive enough with your staff and have now created something that could potentially impact their ability to do work, which
Exactly.
which we keep in mind, and our process is one that mitigates that. So there's a couple here around Power BI. So I guess let's just kind of go one at a time. So can you use sensitivity labels for Power BI?
So yes, the short answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can assign sensitivity labels to Power BI content. So that includes semantic models, reports, dashboards, and data flows. And when the labeled content or the labeled data is exported, Power BI actually automatically applies the label and protects the file according to the label's encryption settings. So yes, you can use sensitivity labels for Power BI.
Okay. And what about the second question here? Can you use DLP for Power BI?
So yes, as well. It is slightly limited, but once a data set's published to the Power BI service and it has to be in a premium workspace, you can use DLP to detect sensitive data. But currently, DLP policies for Power BI only generate user notifications via the policy tips. And they also, it also creates alerts in the Purview portal, but that's the extent of DLP for Power BI as it stands. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We do have a question in the chat from Rich, and I'm just going to read through it here. So the question is on with regards to the implementation plan. So looking at companies that are prone to litigation, like construction companies, healthcare providers, if they're concerned about being ready for e-discovery, how would your suggested phases vary, if at all?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? If they're prone to.
Yeah, so if we're talking about companies that are prone to litigation, such as construction and healthcare, if they're
Mhm.
concerned about being ready for e-discovery, how would your suggested phases vary? The question follows on, would it still be data classification policy development, then information protection, then DLP, then data retention, et cetera, or would it be a different route, based on that
So I would still say that we go that route.
traditional route?
Yeah, I typically think that that satisfies the majority of situations in my from my experience. But e-discovery itself, there's really not too much setup involved with that. So it's something that we can kind of just plug and play. But we do want to have our labels set up for our information protection, our data loss prevention in place. Um, I would say before, getting into that. So
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's sort of the value that we're bringing to the mix here as a company that's now operating in the DLP space is, being able to have the best practices knowledge to outline how to deploy this stuff, but then also be able to, pivot as needed for each customer specific deployment. So, it's a good question of if we would modify the order in which we did the work, but I think that question and the answer to that question really come down to understanding the unique situation the customer may be in. So, our
yeah,
default is going to be to follow the prescribed
right.
process that we have, and then, if we need to deviate from that, we certainly can.
Yeah,
Whatever makes the
absolutely.
most sense. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say, Bush. Just kind of building off of that, right? If there's a customer has requirements where they don't want the full soup to nuts and they just want a certain solution, that's totally fine too, right? Just knowing that these are best practices, they're best practices for a reason. This is kind of the default baseline how I would go about doing it.
Hmm.
Um, uh, full as far as a full scale deployment, but we can always like kind of nitpick at certain solutions if you're interested. Maybe you just want retention labels, right? So then we can go in and just do our data lifecycle management piece. Um, and maybe you just want to label your data with sensitivity labels, right? Which is, let me distinguish that that's different than retention labels. So this, maybe you just wanted to protect, your M365 environment with sensitivity labels, right? And we could just do that. Not everyone's going to be interested in the full scale deployment, but this is more or less like a default and baseline what we would follow. So,
Right. How to take a bite of the elephant one at a time, right? So
mhm.
it's yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important to note to everyone who's consuming this webinar, either live or the recording, is that uh, this feels like a lot of information. This feels like a fairly heavy process. And I think to a large degree that's because it can be.
Mhm.
But there are ways to,
Break it
every
down.
every yeah,
Yeah.
every company is going to have some low hanging fruit. They're going to
Mhm.
have some immediate needs, and then they're going to have some nice to haves. And that's sort of another value that we're bringing to this process is to help identify that. And then not only just, kind of nod and say, yes, we'll do it, but explain, if we do it that way, here are the risks that remain on the table, things to consider, and really provide sort of that trusted advisory role for customers that are looking to embark on this. So, it's not a one size fits all solution, but we're in a fortunate position to be a provider that can help, right size the solution for the customer.
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, Josh. So why don't we work towards wrapping this up a little bit?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, we may have. Oh, yep, absolutely. Thank you. You're getting thanks from the chat that they
No,
appreciate the info. So,
absolutely.
and we'll
Yeah.
wrap up here with a way to get a hold of us for some more information as well. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just going to say that's all the material I have today. Thanks again for your time, and I'm looking forward to assisting you on your data protection journey. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you. And again, my name is Bush Williams. I am our Director of Microsoft Business Development here at AIT. just entering into, I think, my 17th year with the firm. So I've been around a little while. Haven't been more excited than I am right now for solutions around Purview and DLP. It's for sure been one of our most asked for. We reached, we went on the hunt. We found Josh. We didn't jump into the Purview solutions field until we felt like we had found the right resources to build the right team, and we're just really confident now in being able to speak to authority on the subject, to have Josh on board, and to continue to build out successful Purview deployments. So. Again, Bush Williams here. Feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in this slide. Again, AIT is a provider of not only security solutions, but all Microsoft managed solutions. We are a kind of a one-stop shop, both MSP and MSSP for all things Microsoft. Not a everything partner, but if you're into the Microsoft ecosystem, we will for sure help you maximize the investment that you've made there through things like Defender, Sentinel, Azure adoption, even down into products like SQL database management. So anything that may strike our customers from a need of Microsoft management, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see how we can match a solution to your needs. So thanks again, everybody, for attending, and we will get this recording out with the slides to everyone here very shortly, and I hope you all have a great day.
So thanks again.